Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Yehudiel, and I serve as J&F professional in Northern New Jersey and Rockland County, alongside Bob and Joan Oppenheimer, our local co-presidents. I am so pleased to welcome people from across the nation. COVID has brought many challenges to us this year, but it cannot keep us apart as J&F family. It is now my honor to welcome a very special man whose decades of commitment to the land and the people of Israel and the Jewish National Fund USA is beyond repute. He currently serves as president of Jewish National Fund USA and has led our organization from strength to strength. Throughout his career, he received many awards and appointments, including Health Advisor to California Governor Jerry Brown, Trustee of the U.S. Olympic Committee, Trustee at the University of California, San Diego, and many more. He was also the recipient of a California state resolution recognizing his contribution to healthcare and is also a previous winner of Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming our fearless leader, Dr. Sol Lieserbram.
Good morning. I am Sol Lieserbram, National President of Jewish National Fund. I am zooming in from my home in San Diego, where it is early and beautiful, and honored to open up the 4th annual community brunch featuring Alan Zweibel, interviewed by David Barry. Wow, there are over 500 people at the brunch. Congratulations. J&F is extremely active even during the challenges of COVID, and I am proud to announce that as of today, we have reached $740 million towards our $1 billion roadmap. This has never been done before in Jewish philanthropy. So thank you for helping the land and people of Israel. Now I will turn the program over to Mark Seiden, Northern New Jersey's Vice President.
Good morning. Thank you, Sal. My name is Mark Seiden, and I serve as the Northern New Jersey Vice President and incoming President. On behalf of my wife, Diane, we welcome you to what promises to be a lively and engaging discussion between two well-known raconteurs, Alan Zweibel and Dave Barry. It's great to have so many people from across the country joining us. J&F and Israel has been a meaningful part of my life, from spending childhood summers in Israel, high school fundraising, and educating my peers about J&F in my local community, which is where my commitment began. When my siblings and I reached our 21st birthday, our parents gave us each a J&F woodland as a gift and a way to have a living connection with Israel. As I start to learn more about J&F, I quickly realized that they do more than trees and blue boxes. Therapeutic horseback riding at Kibbutz Grafit in the south, building an underground playground, fire and rescue services, building a culinary school in North. J&F ensures that all needs are met in Israel. From the Negev to the Galilee, each project is fascinating. While we have accomplished so much since our founding in 1901, we have a lot more work to do. These projects are being supported by people like you and me. This morning, you have an opportunity to partner with J&F by investing in this visionary organization. You will receive a text right now and should be able to see a link on the screen. We thank you in advance for your participation and generosity. Now, I'll turn it over to Debbie.
It is my privilege to introduce you to a man who has won 5 Emmy Awards for his work in television. His credits include Saturday Night Live, It's Gary Shandling's Show, The Late Show with David Letterman, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. His latest book, a cultural memoir titled Laugh Lines, My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier, was recently published. A movie he co-wrote with Billy Crystal titled Here Today that stars Crystal and Tiffany Haddish will be released later this year. I would also like to introduce you to a man who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning humorist and commentator. One of Barry's columns was largely responsible for the movement to observe International Talk Like a Pirate Day every year on September 19th. He has written more than 30 books, including the novels Big Trouble, Lunatics, Tricky Business, and most recently, Insane City. Two of his books were the basis for the CBS sitcom Dave's World. It is my pleasure to introduce you to both Alan Zweibel and Dave Barry. Enjoy them.
Are they enjoying us yet? Dave, I think Dave might be having some technical difficulties. He just called me. So I'll talk until Dave gets on. I'm Alan, and I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me as part of your program. And yes, I am here to talk about my latest book, Laugh Lines, My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier. And it is, as Debbie said, it's a cultural memoir. For years, I had been asked to write something like this because I've been fortunate enough to be, I guess, old enough to have spanned a lot of generations and new movements in comedy, starting with writing for the Catskill Comedians when I just got out of college, and Saturday Night Live and It's Gary Shandling Show, which was at the beginning of cable television, a comedy. My work with Billy Crystal, we won a Tony on Broadway for a show I co-wrote called 700 Sundays, and Larry David. And it's just, I've been doing this a long time now. And the reason I wrote this book, I'll get to in a little bit, but there was an emotional tug that happened that made me, I didn't want to write something that said, oh, and then I wrote this, and then I wrote that. What I did was I put it aside, and I had a great relationship, working relationship with Gilda Ratner when I was with SNL, and later on with Gary Shandling. And when Gilda died, I was able to deal with her death in another book that I had written called Bunny Bunny, which was a reconstruction of what our relationship had been. And it became a play. So I was able to, there was a catharsis there. There was a revisiting of somebody that I loved, and I wanted to revisit one more time. With Gary Shandling, which came later in my career, we didn't get along at the end of our relationship, our work relationship. And we were moving towards each other in the years afterwards. He was appearing in Atlantic City, and my wife, Robin, called him and said, listen, I'm bringing Alan down. I'm putting you both in a room, and you're not coming out until you're friends again. And we did that, and we slowly started becoming friends again, and the circle was almost complete. And then I was out in California working with Billy Crystal on this movie that Debbie mentioned, which I'll get to. And Gary and I were talking about having dinner, and I thought that this would do it. This would complete the circle for us being friends again. And it was a Sunday. We couldn't get it together for dinner. I had to come back to New York the next day. So we made a plan to speak on that Thursday night. Gary died Thursday morning. So when I realized that I hadn't done with Gary what I had done with Gilda, I said, okay, maybe this will be an opportunity to give it a little bit of emotional thrust. And so I said, okay, let me start writing this book. The book, like I said, covers my career, but the hell with my career. What it is it's comedy since 1972. I find it ironic, the whole thing, that I've been able to have this career of TV and movies and Broadway and books. The irony being that it was initially not even my idea to become a comedy writer. This was a decision that was made for me, I'd say about 40 years ago, by every law school in the United States. I graduated the University of Buffalo in 1972, and I had good grades, but you had to take the law boards, the LSATs, to get into law school. And I don't know how they grade them these days. Maybe it's the same, but back then, if you can write your name, you got a 200. If you were like Einstein, you got an 800. If you were Alan Zweibel, you got a 390, which was like vegetable mentality. So I remember going home and telling my Long Island Jewish parents that I got a 390 in the law boards. And about a week later, this is after they uncovered the mirrors, my dad gave me $1,000, which I then took and gave to a man named Stanley Kaplan. For those of you who may not be familiar with Stanley Kaplan, he's got these schools all over the country where they teach you how to take standardized tests. And I gave him the $1,000, and for 6 months, I studied. I wanted to retake the law boards, and I had a number 2 pencil, and I had the earphones, and I'm going over old tests, and I retook the law boards, and my score catapulted up to a 401, which I figured out I would be around 90 before I got into an English-speaking law school. So I moved back in with my parents to my old bedroom in Woodmere, Long Island, and I started writing jokes for comedians who worked in the Catskill Mountains. I'm sure you're all familiar with what the Catskill Mountains was at the time. It was the hotbed. It was the breeding ground for comedy. They had these hotels that had these huge nightclubs in them. And that's where Buddy Hackett and Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and Toady Fields and Alan King, that's where they learned their craft before they went on to be getting their own TV shows and becoming big stars. And but by the time I got there in 1972, the only people who were left performing up there were the guys who were not going to make it. Okay, they were the also-rans, but it was a real kick to write for guys like Morty Gunty and Freddie Roman. These were men that when my parents used to take us for holiday weekends up at the Catskills when I was growing up, I used to sneak into the nightclubs. I was too young, and I'd see them perform. And now I was writing for them, and they paid me $7 a joke. That was the going rate in 1972. That's what Catskill comedians paid writers for jokes. And I can't hear any of you guys say yes, so I'm just going to assume that your answer will be yes when I ask, do you want to hear a $7 joke? So here goes. The first joke I ever got $7 for, a comedian named Morty Gunty called me and said, yeah, you understand, I'm 21. He's 45. So it's like writing for my parents' generation. The sensibilities just weren't, weren't in sync. It was like I was of the children of these guys, that age, okay? But I wrote a joke saying, he said to me, sperm banks are in the news. Can you write me a sperm bank joke? So I said that they have a new thing now called sperm banks, which is just like an ordinary bank, except here, after you make a deposit, you lose interest. Okay, $7. I'm now up to $7. I'm now a professional comedy writer. And the phone rings about a week later, and a comedian named Freddie Roman calls and says, hey, I heard you write great sperm bank jokes. And I'm going, how did I become this guy? So, all right, fine. So I gave him what I did. It was starting to freeze sperm. So I looked into the future and I said, this can be a problem. I said, because it's hard enough telling a kid he's been adopted. How do you tell me he's been defrosted? Okay, so now I'm up to $14. I'm living at home with my parents in my old bed. And it was really harrowing time because all my college friends had gone on to med school and dental school and law school. And to supplement this great living that I was making at $7 a joke as a comedy writer, I took a job at a delicatessen on Hillside Avenue in Queens. You name it, I sliced it for about 2 years. And I used to stand behind the counter and write jokes on little bags and shove them inside my pocket, go back to Long Island at night and type them up and categorize them. And it was difficult. I mean, it was a kick to hear my jokes get laughs. Some of these guys were real big pains in the ass because they would only pay me if the joke got a laugh. So I mean, I would send them jokes. I'd take my parents' car. I'd drive up to the Concord Hotel or Grossinger's or one of those places. And I would sit in the back, listen to my jokes. And some of the, invariably the comic would come off stage and go, gee, that joke about paving the driveway, that didn't get a laugh. And I go, gee, I heard a laugh. So that we would bargain and I would go home with $4. Okay, so I was going nowhere fast. working in a deli, writing jokes for these guys. It was difficult. As much as I enjoyed it, as big a kick as I got getting laughs, it was not my sensibility. I wanted to talk to people my own age. Woodstock had happened, and Nixon resigned, and there was Watergate. That was my generation. George Carlin was our hero. Those kind of people, Richie Pryor. And and here I am, on the strength of my sperm bank jokes, my price went up to $10 and $12. The most I ever got for one single joke up in the Catskills was $18. I got high for a joke I had written about a Hasidic orgy, which was really unusual because the men were on one side of the room and the women were on the other. And I'm dying a miserable death there. You see, these guys were very good commercial comedians, but they had no distinct personalities, okay? They would tell a joke, and if it got a laugh, they used it, and if not, they gave it to the other comedian. I wanted to write scripts someday. I wanted the characters to be different. And it wasn't until I started writing for guys, let's say like Rodney Dangerfield, that I started writing for somebody who had a distinct personality. Rodney had that thing, I don't get no respect. So it was easy for me to have him say, even as an infant, my mother wouldn't breastfeed me. She said she liked me as a friend. That was easier to do than to write a self-contained joke for these other guys. So what I decided to do is I'm looking around, I'm going, now, Catskills were dying, the hotels were starting to close. They were staying open only because they were hoping to get gambling up there. So the place would be revived, okay? Like it was in Atlantic City. Well, that never happened. So I looked at the landscape. I go, okay, what's the new breeding ground? Where are the new comics coming from? So in New York, this is around 1974, there were two clubs in New York. One was called Catch a Rising Star. The other one was called The Improvisation. That was the new breeding ground. That's where David Brenner, that's where Lily Tomlin, that's where Richard Pryor, that's where my good friend Larry David was starting. So here was my plan. To take all the jokes that those old guys wouldn't buy from me because it wasn't working for their audiences, go on stage and deliver them. And with the hopes that maybe a manager or an agent would come in, like the material, and give me, want to represent me to help me get a TV job. Well, I did that. And the first week I'm there, I'm hanging out at the clubs. I met a guy who was also just starting out. His name was Billy Crystal. I lived in Woodmere, Long Island with my parents. He lived 4 or 5 towns over in Long Beach, okay? And he had a little blue Volkswagen. We became good friends. And he would pick me up every night. We would drive into the city. We would tell our jokes. And on the way back, we would listen to the cassettes and critique each other. Which jokes worked, which new jokes didn't work. Maybe if you said it this way, maybe you said it that way. And I'm about 4 months now into this new experiment of mine. And I'm on stage one night, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm having the hardest time in the world making these 6 drunks from Des Moines laugh. I get off the stage and I'm really depressed, and I go over to the bar and I'm waiting for Billy to be done so he can give me a ride home. A guy sits down next to me, and he stares at me, and finally I go, what do you want? Why are you staring? He said, you're the worst comedian I've ever seen in my life. Well, thank you. I really need to hear that now. It really helps my ego. He says, but your material's not bad. Did you write it? And I said, yeah. He said, can I see more of it? And I didn't even ask who this was. At this point, I would have shown it to like a gardener, and it ends up, this is Lorne Michaels. This is April of 1975. He's going from club to club in New York City, looking for actors and writers for this new show that he was going to have called Saturday Night Live that would premiere in the fall. I go back to my parents' house on Long Island. I sit at my mom and dad's kitchen table for 2 straight days, typing up what I believed were 1,100 of my best jokes. Okay, and back then the typewriters had the keys that went like this, and they became ensnarled, and then you had to detach them, and you got all the ink. It was a mess. And 2 days later, I had to go back into the city to have my meeting with Lauren. And I was really nervous to the point where I didn't even know what to wear. You know, I'm thinking, okay, young, hip producer, young, hip show. Oh, I know, I'll dress young, I'll dress hip. I put on my father's maroon polyester leisure suit. I looked like a big blood clot sitting on the Long Island Railroad going into the city for my meeting with Lauren. And he was staying, if memory serves, at the Plaza Hotel. And like, my meeting was at 2 o'clock. And like I said, I was really nervous. I didn't want to be late. So I got there like 7 in the morning, and I saw a pay phone. This is April of 75, no cell phones. And I call on a pay phone. I called Billy Crystal. Billy had been spending time with Lauren. Okay, they had had dinners, they went for walks, they spoke comedy. There had been some talk even that Billy would be part of this new show. And I said, listen, I'm about to have a meeting with Lorne Michaels. Can you tell me a little bit about him? And he said, well, he's worked with Woody Allen. He's produced some Monty Python specials, and he hates mimes. Oh, Lorne hates mimes. I said, okay, I got it. 2 o'clock, I go upstairs. And I remember I sat at the edge of the bed. Lorne pulls up a chair, and I hand him this tome with 1,100 jokes. And he opens the book, and he reads the first joke, one joke. Then he closes the book. I'm up for 2 days, 1,100 jokes. He reads one joke. And to show you how long ago this was, from the reference points, I had written a joke saying, the post office is about to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp. If you want to lick it, it's a quarter. And he said, good. And he said, how much money do you need to live on? I said, well, I'm making $2.75 an hour at the deli. Match it. And he said, well, tell me a little bit more about yourself, which I took to mean that before he committed to this kind of cash, he wanted to know what he was buying. So I remembered my phone call with Billy, and I said, well, Woody Allen's my idol. I love Monty Python, but if there's one fucking mime on this show, I am out of here. And he gave me a job.
Alan.
Dave. Howdy, everybody. Dave, you know where I'm up to. How are you? Welcome.
I'm good, thank you. And I apologize to everyone, but I am in Florida and we get our internet by a snake or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's finally come through. Anyway, I apologize. I wanted to, first of all, I think the way it looks on my screen, I look like Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder.
Yeah, you're right over here. Yeah, no, I feel you.
So, and I was told to come in if you ever dropped any F-bombs. So that's when I interrupted you there.
You know, when I got up to that word, I'm going, do I say frick or do I go for it? And it doesn't look like we've lost any participants. As a matter of fact, it looks like we've gained some. So,
you know, we're now trending on Netflix. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, because that's what I'm supposed to be asking you some questions here. And I know that I don't have to. I could basically just let you continue and you would tell your entire life story. But I did want to ask you, when you were at Saturday Night Live, I know that you finally got hired. That's how far you got in your story. Did you have to deal with censors at all? Was that an issue?
Oh God, was it ever? I mean, you got to remember what the landscape was like when we started the show. There was no cable. There was no streaming. There was not even Fox. There was ABC, NBC, CBS. That was television. So to break the rules and to expand the parameters a little bit, we had to do it in small increments. And it was interesting because when I wrote this book, I actually interviewed one of the old censors who's in his 90s now. And, you know, he said, we'd get the script, we'd read it, and then we go, oh, damn, now I got to go to work, editing this thing. In particular, there's one story I like to tell about. There was a woman who was a censor. Her name was Jane Crowley. Large woman, ex-nun, dress shields. You know who I'm talking about. And what they have on Saturday nights before the show airs at 11:30, they have a dress rehearsal. at 7:30. There's a full audience and they put on a show. You know, everybody's in wardrobe and the bands play. It's a show. And then between dress and air, the audience goes and it's determined what sketches stay in, what sketches are going to be, you know, dropped or held until next week. And you put on the show live at 11:30. It's during the dress rehearsal that this Jane Crowley or any censor would sit in the control room with the script in front of them. It's their last chance to edit, because once you go on the air live, it's out there. You can't hold it back. You can't delete it. So there was a guy on the show, a wonderful writer named Michael O'Donoghue, who was one of the architects in the early days of the show. He had founded the National Lampoon. And at this particular point in time, I was producing the Weekend Update segment of the show. So Michael called me at home and he said, listen, what if Weekend Update is brought to you by a product that we make up? I said, go for it. So this week he had Don Pardo, the announcer, announce, and now Weekend Update brought to you by Pussy Whip. The dessert topping for cats, okay? Pussy Whip, the dessert topping for cats. Well, it brought the house down, and it worked so well that I wanted to write one. So for the following week's dress rehearsal, I have Pardo say, and now Weekend Update brought to you by Blue Balls, B-L-U, Blue Balls, the cheese snack from France. Okay, it worked great. Everybody loved it except one person. The door to the control room opens. Out waddles this Jane Crowley, the censor. She finds me on the studio floor and she says, Alan, when we go on the air, you can't do that. I said, can't do what? She says, you can't say blue balls. I said, why? She says, because it has to do with the male genitalia. I said, Jane, last week you let us say Pussy Whip, which is clearly the female genitalia. And now this, what kind of sexist organization are you running here? She said, give me a minute. She went back into the control room, picked up a phone, called God, I guess. She came out a couple of minutes later, found me on the studio, and she looks at me and she goes, Alan, I've given it some thought, and I've come to the conclusion that because I gave you Pussy Whip last week, I'd be more than happy to give you blue balls this week. And I said, Jane, you know, that's not necessary. Just let us say it on TV. Okay.
All right. Well,
I do, you know.
Okay. Speaking of the Weekend Update, which we all loved, you were very close to one of the stars of the Weekend Update in your day, Gilda Ratner. Can you talk a little bit about Gilda and how you became connected with her?
It was magic, Dave. It was the very, very first day of SNL. I walk into Lorne Michaels' office, biggest day of my life. You know, when I used to run errands for my dad, who manufactured jewelry, his shop, his offices were about 2 blocks away from Rockefeller Center. And wherever the errands that I ran for him had to go, I made sure that I went through 30 Rock into the lobby, okay? Because upstairs, Johnny Carson had the Tonight Show. And there was a show in the 60s called That Was the Week That Was. There were people in that building doing what I wanted to do someday. And now I'm reporting, this is July 7th, 1975, reporting to that same building to be my first meeting as a comedy writer. Well, every dream I had came true. We go up to Lorne's office for our first meeting and I'm looking around and I see John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd and Lorraine Newman, and they're improvising. I had never heard of Second City. I didn't know that. I was a gag writer for the Catskill guys. And I'm going, boy, they were creating characters and scenes on their feet right in front of me. And I'm going, there's no way I can hold a candle to this. So I got scared. So in the corner of Lorne's office was a big potted plant. I went behind it and I squatted down. Biggest day of my life. First day as a TV comedy writer. First meeting, I'm squatting behind a plant. The meeting starts, and all of a sudden, from the other side of the plant, I hear a girl saying, "Can you help me be a parakeet?" What? I parted the leaves and I look out, and it's Gilda. I said, "What?" And she said, yeah, I think it'd be really funny if I scrunched up my face, stood on a perch and spoke like a parakeet, but I need a writer to help me figure out what the parakeet should say. Are you a good parakeet writer? And I said, I'm a great parakeet. I had no idea what I was talking about. And she said, good, good. She said, why are you hiding behind the plant? You nervous? I said, yeah, I'm a little nervous. She said, your first TV show, Alan? And I said, yeah, how do you know my name is Alan? She said, you're the only one wearing a name tag. He said, is there any room behind the plant? I went, yeah. Why? She says, well, it's also my first TV show and I'm nervous. Can I come back there? So I scooched over, she came around, and now we're both squatting behind the plant. This meeting is going on. And that's where I met my buddy Gilda. We got to talking, we made each other laugh. We even had our first fight back there. She offered me some gum. I said, sure, I'll have some gum. And she hands me a pocketbook the size of my high school. She says, take. I said, it's in there? She said, yeah. I said, I can't do that. She said, open the zipper, reach inside, take out gum. I said, I can't do that. She said, why? I said, because I'm a boy and you're a girl, and there may be some things inside of this pocketbook that will eventually be inside of you. I'm a right, vivid imagination. So yes, I do want some gum, but can you please serve it to me? She said, you're Jewish, aren't you? I said, she says, no, no, you're like a major Jew. And we started having this tug of war with the pocketbook when all of a sudden you hear Lorne Michaels going, Alan, where's Alan? I saw him before. Where is he? She says, he's calling on you. He wants to know if you have any ideas for sketches. I said, yeah, but they stink and I don't like talking to people. And she says, I'll take care of it. She stood up, got in front of the plant, addressed the room, referred to me behind the plant and said, Zweibel's got this great idea where I play a parakeet. She attributed her idea to me. And she says, he's really funny. And we are going to be writing partners and platonic friends forever. Now, the writing partners I was thrilled about, but, you know, especially at that age, you know, I always believe that there's one person in the platonic relationship who doesn't want it to be platonic, but you go, all right, if these are the rules, okay, I'll play by them, but one day you'll open your eyes and behold the glory that's in front of you. This lasted 14 years. And we created some nice characters together like Rosanna Dana, and Emily Latella. And I wrote for everybody. I wrote the Samurais for John Belushi and all that. But Gilda was my main writing partner, my platonic friend. And the friendship extended beyond SNL. We both left after 5 years in 1980. And she moved to California, married Gene Wilder. I got married to Robin, and we lived here in New York. And there was no internet in those days, you know. So the 3-hour difference became problematic. And she was doing movies, and our friendship was still there, but it wasn't as intense as it had been. And then ultimately, when I moved to California, I created its Gary Shandling show. Gilda and I resuscitated our platonic friendship. And she became Aunt Gilda to the kids. She and Robin became incredibly close. And when she got sick, I said, what should I do? What's my role here? And she said, make me laugh. And that was my role in my friend's life when she got sick. The last TV appearance she ever had was on its Gary Shandling show. I remember that she was nervous coming on because there would be an audience of 300 people who she was afraid that wouldn't recognize it because she looked different now, hadn't been on TV in 6-7 years at this point. And when she came through the door, they didn't know that she was going to be on the show. It was a surprise. 300 people that she said thought that wouldn't recognize her. I never heard an ovation like this in my life. And then I remember I went to edit the show. TV shows are usually have 4 cameras shooting the same scene from different angles. And you go into the editing room and you piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle. And the angle that I wanted on her entrance onto the set, I noticed that the frame was jumping just a little bit, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I remembered the night that we were shooting the show, the cameraman who was on that camera was crying and his hands were shaking. So if anybody ever sees that repeat, okay, look for it. It's not really big, it's subtle, but I left it in as a tribute to her. And my role was to make her laugh. I would tell her jokes on the phone. Shandling and I would we would produce a show every week. We'd send her the cassette, like a Hallmark card. And even when she got very sick, my platonic friend, that was my role, to make her laugh. She wanted me to make her laugh. I remember I went to Cedars-Sinai to give her blood. And I'm lying on the gurney and a nurse came over with a pad and a pen. And I go, what's this? And she said, well, Gilda likes to know whose blood she's getting. Write her something nice. She's having a tough time. And I wrote, dear Gilda, I knew I'd get some fluid of mine in you one way or another, which pretty much sized up the 14-year platonic friendship. I hope I answered your question, Dave.
Yes, you did, but you lead me to another one. Your book, Laugh Lines, besides being the story of your career, it's the story of a lot of friendships, just like Gilda, which is one of the more significant ones, but there are others. I went on a book tour with you a few years ago, and I concluded from that book tour that you are friends with approximately 2/3 of the people in North America. Everywhere we went, we ran into you went to the world's biggest high school, because half the signing line where people went to high school with you, but also in show business everywhere. I will never forget, we were in LA, I think, or somewhere in the West Coast. And Jennifer Grey was a guest on one of the and I'm like, Jennifer Grey, well, oh yeah, she was in Dirty Dancing. She looks different now and everything. And she comes off the stage and goes, Alan Zweibel.
Oh, yeah. We were
everybody
in San Francisco. Yes, I remember that.
But everybody knows you and everybody loves you. You have a remarkable ability to make friends and then to keep them over the years. And that is, you're in a very collaborative medium, obviously, so that helps a lot. But can you talk a little bit about friendship and the role it's played in your career? And I want to specifically at some point get into, if you could, a friendship that became troubled, which was your friendship with Gary Shandling, when you two created what I consider to be one of the top 3 comedy shows of all time. It's Gary Shandling Show. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, you bet, Dave. What had happened was, as far as collaborations are concerned, I learned early on that I have some strengths, I have some weaknesses as a writer. As you know, certain ideas are personal visions. You go, okay, only I can do this alone. I can't do this with somebody else. Whatever's inside of me, I got to tap into it and put it on paper. But coming from TV, which is a collaborative medium, it becomes social. You know, you look at our collaborations. We've done like 4 books together, and it's fun. We do what we do alone, but it's also fun to go, okay, I should be hearing from Dave, because we would alternate chapters, let's say, when you and I were writing Lunatics, or when we were with Adam Mansbach. So there's a diversion there. There's an immediate feedback, and there's a synergy of 1 and 1 equaling 3. When it started with SNL, whether it was Belushi or Gilda, later on Billy Crystal and Larry David on Curb, it's social. 2 people, just like any friends, make each other laugh. And it's an interesting kind of phenomenon where there's enough similar where you appreciate each other's sense of humor, but it's different enough by 10 or 15% where the alchemy becomes that you create something that you couldn't have done alone. Do you know what I mean? I remember when we write our books, when we wrote Lunatics together, Dave and I would assume 2 different character roles, and we alternated chapters. I would send him off a chapter in the voice of the character I was doing, not having any idea what would be flying back in my direction. And it was like having a pen pal who was like this deranged Unabomber. I'm going, wow, I could never have thought of that. And then what I sent back was built on that. So I love those kind of, it benefits the material. In particular, I've had success with Billy Crystal with It's 700 Sundays, or this new movie called Here Today with he and Tiffany Haddish. Gary Shandling, I hit upon earlier. For me, when I met Gary Shandling, it was like lightning striking a second time after Gilda. We got along. We made each other laugh. And I'll show you the magic that existed there. And there's an intangible thing. He created the show called It's Gary Shandling Show. We hadn't done it yet. It was still in its, formative stages of writing. And he said to me, we're going to need a theme song. And I went, what are you thinking? Now we're waiting for an elevator. We're in a building in Los Angeles. And he said, well, since this is going to be a TV show about a TV show, why don't we do a theme song about a theme song? And I go, like what? And now the elevator doors open. We walk onto the elevator and he goes, well, how about this is the theme to Gary's show, the theme to Gary's show. Gary called me up and asked if I would write a theme song. Elevator doors close, and I look at him and go, I'm almost halfway finished. How do you like it so far? How do you like the theme to Gary's show? We're going down in the elevator. There's other people on it, mind you. And he says, this is the theme to Gary's show, the opening theme to Gary's show. This is the music that you hear as you watch the credits. I said, I'm almost to the part where we start to whistle. I don't know. Then we'll watch It's Gary Shandling Show. We whistled, got to the lobby, elevator doors open. He looks at me and he goes, this was the theme to Gary Shandling's show. Had a theme song. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. We said, it's been a full day. We went home. So there was a magic there. We did have, it became contentious. The show lasted 4 years. I'm married. We now had 3 children. My life experiences were changing. I became the commissioner of our son Adam's Little League. So I knew what it was like to walk into a restaurant and have the parents of kids in the Little League boo me because I rescheduled a rain date, which was in conflict, with the Schwedelson bar mitzvah and their kids do the pitch and all of that stuff. I wanted to write about that. Gary's show was limiting. He played himself as a comedian. And so I wanted to flex different muscles. And rightfully so, I had divided focus, rightfully so, meaning that Gary grew upset with me. I wasn't giving him the 100% that I had vowed to do. And we weren't talking by the time the show ended. And one of the reasons for writing this book, I had said earlier, was that with Gilda's death, I wrote Bunny Bunny, which was a way of reconnecting. Gilda took a wider turn. She was very sick for a few years. Gary all of a sudden was dead. And we hadn't totally completed our journey back toward each other as friends. So part of the reason for writing this book at this time was I devote 2 chapters to Gary. I wanted to reconnect.
To me, the book is very funny and there's lots of amazing humor in it. But for me, one of the most interesting parts was and funny actually, is when you talk about failure. And no, you have had a couple of spectacular failures in your life. But anyway, yeah. I think we're supposed to be wrapping up this part soon. So I was going to ask you about specifically your failure involving a movie. You've had a couple of good failures, but this one was a pretty major.
Oh yeah, no, I've had a few really spectacular ones, but I'll pick this one. I had written a book when I left SNL called North, and basically, our son Adam was 7, and he was at that age where he'd sit at the dinner table with me and Robin. He would look at the 2 of us, and from the expression on his face, you can tell the kid was thinking, I can do better than these 2. Okay, so I wrote a little novella about a 7-year-old boy named North who he didn't feel appreciated, declared himself a free agent from his parents, went all over the world offering his services as a son to the highest bidding set of parents. It did okay. The book just did okay. I sent the galleys to Rob Reiner just asking for a blurb. Okay, and I remember the blurb that he gave me was, if you read 1 book this year, I wouldn't call you an avid reader. Okay. That was the blurb. But he said, I'm a director now. No kidding. He doing Harry Met Sally, Princess Bride, Spinal Tap, Few Good Men. He says, let's do a movie. Music to my ears. I moved the family out to LA. 2 years I worked on the script of adapting North into a screenplay. $50 million movie. Jason Alexander, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Elijah Wood, my old friend Dan Aykroyd, Bruce Willis. There was an 8-year-old actress. It was her first movie. That 8-year-old girl's name was Scarlett Johansson. Biggest night of my life, big Hollywood premiere. I fly my parents out from Florida. There were 2 less Jews in Boca that night, okay? And everything was great until the next day. The reviews came out. And if those of you who may not remember, Roger Ebert's review, what he thought of my masterpiece.
Wait, you carry that around in your wallet, do you, Alan?
You know something? It humbles me, Dave. This is what he wrote. I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it. Hated the sensibility to the thought anyone would like it. Hated the implied insult to the audience by its belief that anyone would actually be entertained by it. Dave, on the surface, this may seem like an unfavorable review, but if you read it a few times, I think it was the worst day of my life. It was, we lived in LA where everybody roots for everybody's failure. Robin would go to the supermarket, and the other housewives would shun her. Son Adam would come home from school and say, Dad, is it okay if we change our last name to Sorkin? Awful. But the book does have that, and it has another TV show that he did with Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal. Babe Ruth struck out, and I thought it was interesting that I put it in there because it did have a psychological effect. You start off so great, you think you found the key to success, and all of a sudden the world says, not so fast. Okay, so it's in there.
Well, I think our time is up, and I apologize again for jumping in late, but the book is wonderful. You're wonderful. I don't know if you have any final words.
Always appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
I don't know what we do now.
Do we do something? Does something happen?
This is the end of the Zoom.
Oh, you know what I think happens now? I think that we're off, and then there's a second link here for, I think it's a meet and greet.
Wow, wasn't that amazing? Good morning, everyone. I'm Bob Oppenheimer, and together with my wife, Joan, serve as co-president for JNF's Northern New Jersey and Rockland chapter. We are proud to be with you this morning, and thank you for your attending our virtual brunch. Of course, we want to thank Alan Zweibel and Dave Barry for this fun start of the day and week. We are grateful to all who have joined this morning, especially those who are investors in the important work of JNF, because we could not accomplish all that is done without you. JNF does so much for the land and people of Israel, covering the areas of safety, disabilities, jobs, culinary education, building hospitals, and much, much more. As a matter of fact, the breadth of JNF is one of the best kept secrets, and we hope you will help us change that. If you have not yet made a text or phone contribution, we would appreciate your doing so. Your investment is critical in supporting JNF's numerous programs, and we thank you in advance for your generosity and involvement. A reminder for major donors that have invested $5,000 or more, there will be a private meet and greet with Alan Zweibel immediately after this program. Additionally, for those interested in learning more about JNF's planned giving opportunities, there will be a virtual event on December 3rd at 7:30 p.m. Once again, thank you and stay well.